At Thanksgiving dinner, I looked my aunt in the eye and thanked her for the rusty bicycle she had sent me as a gift. The entire table went silent. My aunt put down her wine glass and stared at me with confusion. She said, "I did not send you a bicycle, Nia. I sent you the keys and title to a brand new matte black Mercedes G-Wagon." My sister Tanisha spit out her cranberry sauce. My brother-in-law Chad choked on a piece of turkey. In that moment, I realized my family had not just insulted me, they had committed a federal crime. Before I tell you how I used my skills as a forensic accountant to send them to prison, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to save your own sanity. The nightmare began 6 hours earlier in my mother Mama Louise's kitchen. The air was thick with the smell of roasting sage and the overwhelming heat from an oven that should have been replaced 10 years ago. Sweat trickled down my back as I wrestled with a 20-pound turkey trying to maneuver it onto the serving platter. My arms were shaking from exhaustion. I had been cooking since 4 in the morning, chopping vegetables, making 3 different types of pies, and ensuring the macaroni and cheese was baked to perfection. Meanwhile, the living room erupted with cheers from the football game. The swinging door to the kitchen flew open and my brother-in-law Chad walked in. He did not ask if I needed help. He did not offer to carry the heavy platter. Instead, he leaned against the counter holding an empty bottle and sighed loudly. "Hey, Nia, we are out of cold beers out here. You need to restock the cooler. Also, I checked the turkey while you were in the bathroom, and it looks a little dry. You know you really should baste it every 20 minutes, not every 30. It is basic thermodynamics, Nia. Maybe if you paid as much attention to cooking as you do to your boring spreadsheets, you would have a husband by now." I gripped the edge of the counter to stop myself from screaming. I am a senior forensic accountant for one of the top firms in Atlanta. I uncover million-dollar fraud schemes for a living. Yet here in this house to a 35-year-old man who has failed at 7 different startup businesses, I was nothing more than unpaid help. I took a deep breath and looked over at my sister Tanisha, who was sitting at the breakfast nook. She was scrolling through her phone, not lifting a finger. "Tanisha, can you please help me get the collard greens into the serving bowl?" I asked. My voice came out more desperate than I intended. Tanisha did not even look up from her screen. She extended her hand to admire her long acrylic nails painted a garish neon pink. "Are you crazy, Nia? I just paid $200 for this set. I am not risking a chip just because you cannot handle a simple dinner service. Besides, Mom said you need the practice. Being a good hostess is the only way you are going to catch a man, since you clearly do not have my looks." She laughed, and it was a cruel sound that made my stomach turn. I looked down at my own hands bare and burned from the oven and felt a familiar wave of humiliation wash over me. I was the one paying the mortgage on this house, but they treated me like the maid. After I finished washing the mountain of dishes alone, I wiped my hands and joined the family in the living room. It was time for the gift exchange, a tradition that usually ended with me feeling invisible. Tanisha went first, handing Mama Louise a bright orange box. Mama squealed with delight as she pulled out a silk scarf printed with what looked like the Hermes logo. "Oh, Tanisha, baby, you spoil me," Mama cooed, wrapping the polyester blend around her neck. "This must have cost a fortune." I bit my tongue. I had seen that exact scarf on a counterfeit website I investigated for a fraud case last month. It cost $20 at most, but Tanisha sat there soaking up the praise like she was royalty. Then Tanisha turned to me with a smirk that did not reach her eyes. She went to the hallway and dragged in a large object covered in a black trash bag. "This is from Aunt Verna," she announced loudly so everyone could hear. "She had it shipped here, but asked me to present it to you." She ripped off the plastic to reveal a mountain bike. But it was not new. The handlebars were rusted, the chain was dry, and the frame had been spray-painted a dull gray that was already chipping to reveal bright blue underneath. The seat was torn and taped over with electrical tape. I stared at it in confusion. Why would Aunt Verna, who always bought quality, send me something that looked like it was fished out of a dumpster? Tanisha laughed, seeing my expression. "Do not look so disappointed, Nia. Aunt Verna said she noticed you have been packing on the pounds lately. She specifically said she bought you a bike instead of a gift card because you need the exercise. She thought you could pedal to work to slim down before you get too old and heavy to find a husband. The room erupted in laughter. My face burned with shame. I am a size 8, healthy and active, but in this house I was treated like a monster. Mama Louise chuckled, sipping her wine and adjusting her fake scarf. Well, Verna has a point, Nia. You could stand to lose a few inches if you want to catch a man like Tanisha did. A little cardio won't kill you. Chad leaned back in the recliner, his belly straining against his shirt buttons. He pointed his beer bottle at me and burped loudly before speaking. Plus it makes sense economically, Nia. Gas is expensive these days. Someone with your income bracket should not be driving a car anyway. Bicycles fit your lifestyle better. You know, humble. Keep your expenses low so you can keep helping us out with the bills, right? He winked at Tanisha, and they both howled with laughter. The humiliation was physical, like a punch to the gut. I looked at the rusty bike, then at my family laughing at my expense. I forced a smile and whispered thank you. I had no idea that this rusty piece of metal was actually a stolen decoy, and that the real gift was sitting in Tanisha's garage waiting to destroy them all. Just as I forced that painful thank you past my lips, the heavy oak front door swung open. A gust of cold November air swirled into the warm living room, followed immediately by the sharp rhythmic click-clack of designer heels on the hardwood floor. Aunt Verna had finally arrived. She swept into the room wearing a floor-length faux fur coat and oversized sunglasses that she did not remove despite being indoors. At 55 years old, Aunt Verna was a force of nature. As a self-made real estate mogul who owned half the commercial buildings in downtown Atlanta, she commanded attention without saying a single word. She kissed Mama Louise on the cheek and gave a curt nod to Tanisha, but her eyes immediately locked onto me. She walked straight past Chad, who had stood up to offer a clumsy greeting, and took my hands in hers. Her grip was warm and firm. "Nia. Darling, you look exhausted," she said, examining my face with concern. "I hope these people have not been working you like a dog in the kitchen all day." Before I could answer, she looked around the room with an expectant smile. "Now, where is it? I have been dying to see your reaction." I swallowed hard, feeling the humiliation rise in my throat again. I gestured toward the ugly pile of metal sitting in the center of the room. "It is right here, Aunt Verna. Thank you so much. I know I need the exercise, and it was very thoughtful of you to think of my health." I tried to sound grateful, but my voice trembled slightly. I stepped aside so she could get a clear view of the rusty mountain bike Tanisha had presented. Aunt Verna stared at the bicycle. Then she looked at me. Then she looked back at the bicycle. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in genuine confusion. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Is this a joke?" she asked, looking at Mama Louise. "Because if this is a prank, it is not funny. I did not send you a bicycle, Nia. I have not bought a bicycle since 1985. I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound against my ribs. Aunt Verna pulled off her sunglasses and her eyes were blazing with intensity. "Nia, 2 weeks ago I sent a courier here with a priority package addressed to you. Inside were the keys and the title to a brand new 2024 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. Matte black. Custom red leather interior. Fully paid for. It was my gift to celebrate your promotion to senior auditor." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. You could hear a pin drop. The smirk slid off Tanisha's face, instantly replaced by a look of sheer panic. Chad turned a shade of pale that I did not know was possible. Mama Louise stopped mid-sip of her wine, holding the glass near her mouth as her hands started to tremble. Aunt Verna looked from the rusty bike to Tanisha, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "Where is the car, Tanisha? I have the delivery confirmation right here on my phone, signed by you." Aunt Verna did not wait for an answer. She reached into her purse and pulled out her smartphone, unlocking it with a sharp tap of her manicured fingernail. She thrust the screen directly into Tanisha's face. Look at this, she demanded, her voice icy calm. It was a digital delivery confirmation from FedEx. The image on the screen was undeniable. It showed Tanisha standing in the driveway 2 weeks ago, wearing her silk pajamas, holding a thick envelope with the Mercedes-Benz logo clearly visible on the front. She was smiling at the courier. Tanisha stuttered, her face turning a deep shade of crimson. "Oh, that package," she said, looking around the room for an excuse. "I honestly thought it was a mistake, Aunt Verna. I mean, why would anyone send Nia a car like that? It did not make sense, so I assumed it was a clerical error. I was just holding on to it to clear up the confusion with the dealership. I did not want to worry Nia with administrative problems she does not understand." Aunt Verna raised an eyebrow. "You thought a car titled in my name and gifted to my niece was a clerical error, so you decided to drive it for 2 weeks." Tanisha waved her hand dismissively, her confidence returning as she spun her web of lies. "Well, you know how nervous Nia gets behind the wheel. She is a timid driver. A G-Wagon has a lot of horsepower. I was testing the brakes and the handling to make sure it was safe for her. I was doing her a favor, really. I did not want her to crash on her first day and get hurt." Chad jumped in, sensing that his wife was losing the argument. He stood up and crossed his arms, trying to look authoritative. "Exactly, Verna. We were performing a break-in period for the engine. High-performance vehicles need to be handled by experienced drivers first. We were going to detail it and present it to Nia properly once we knew it was mechanically sound. We were trying to do something nice for her, create a big surprise moment. But you just came in here and made everything awkward. You really ruined the surprise, Verna." I stared at them in disbelief. My heart was pounding in my chest. They had stolen my property, driven it for hundreds of miles, likely showed it off to their friends as their own, and now they were acting like the victims. They were twisting reality to make Aunt Verna look like the villain for ruining their non-existent surprise party. It was gaslighting at its finest. They looked at me with disappointment, as if I should be apologizing to them for not receiving my gift fast enough. Aunt Verna let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "So you were breaking in the engine, were you? Is that why the GPS tracker I installed on the vehicle shows it parked outside the Velvet Lounge nightclub 3 times this week until 2 in the morning? Does the engine run better after being parked at a bar, Chad?" The room went silent again. Tanisha gasped, feigning outrage. "You tracked us," she shrieked. "That is an invasion of privacy. We are family. I cannot believe you would spy on your own niece like that." "We were just testing the navigation system at night to see how the headlights performed." Aunt Verna did not buy their story for a second. Her expression remained stone cold as she looked from Tanisha to Chad. "That is the most ridiculous excuse I have ever heard," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Grand theft auto is a felony in this state regardless of whether you are family or not." She tapped her phone screen decisively. "I am calling the police right now. You can explain your testing theories to a judge." She raised the phone to her ear, and I saw Tanisha's eyes widen in genuine terror. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. Mama Louise had dropped her wine glass, shattering it against the hardwood floor. She clutched her chest with both hands, her face contorted in a mask of theatrical agony. "My heart," she gasped, slumping heavily onto the beige sofa. "Oh Lord, my heart is giving out. Verna, do not do this to me. Do not send my baby to jail. You will kill me right here and now." Her breathing became ragged and loud wheezing noises escaped her throat. Tanisha rushed to her side, screaming, "Mom! Mom is having an attack! Look what you did, Aunt Verna! You are stressing her out!" Chad stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Aunt Verna. "Put the phone down, Verna. Can't you see she is dying? If you make that call, her blood is on your hands." The room descended into chaos. I stood frozen in the middle of the storm, watching my mother gasp for air. Deep down, a part of me suspected this was a performance. I had seen her pull similar stunts whenever she wanted to avoid accountability. But the terrified child inside me took over. I could not risk being the reason my mother died on Thanksgiving. I turned to Aunt Verna and grabbed her wrist. "Please do not call them," I whispered, my voice trembling. Aunt Verna looked down at me, her eyes blazing with frustration. "Nia, They stole a $180,000 car from you. You cannot let them get away with this. Mama Louise let out a loud moan from the couch, clutching her chest tighter. Nia, please, she wheezed. We are family. Do not let her destroy us. Tell her to stop. Tears blurred my vision. I looked at Aunt Verna and shook my head slowly. Please, Aunt Verna, just let it go for tonight. Mom is sick. I will figure it out later. Just put the phone away. Aunt Verna lowered her hands slowly. The look she gave me broke my heart more than the theft itself. It was not anger. It was profound disappointment. You are enabling them, Nia, she said quietly so only I could hear. You are teaching them that they can steal from you without consequences. If you do not draw a line now, you never will. She gathered her fur coat and walked toward the door, refusing to look back at the drama on the couch. I cannot watch you do this to yourself, she said. I am leaving. Call me when you are finally ready to stand up for yourself. The front door slammed shut behind her, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. The moment the latch clicked, Mama Louise sat up. The agony vanished from her face instantly. She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and glared at me. That was close, she snapped, her voice perfectly steady. You almost gave me a stroke, Nia. How could you be so selfish, letting her upset the family like that? Tanisha and Chad were already pouring more drinks, laughing about how they dodged a bullet. I stood there alone in the middle of the room, realizing that my mercy had only earned me their contempt. The laughter from the kitchen pierced through me like a physical blow. Tanisha and Chad were popping another bottle of champagne, celebrating their victory over Aunt Verna and their successful manipulation of Mama Louise. I stood alone in the living room, staring at the bicycle that was supposed to be my consolation prize. The more I looked at it, the more my forensic instincts began to twitch. Something was wrong. The gray paint looked wet in some places, and there was a strong chemical smell of cheap aerosol spray that had not quite dissipated. I knelt down next to the bike and ran my finger along the frame. The paint was tacky and came off on my skin, revealing a flash of bright metallic blue underneath. It was a hasty cover-up job done poorly and without patience. I frowned, remembering that particular shade of blue. It triggered a memory from my childhood, something familiar about the curve of the handlebars and the specific wear pattern on the pedal grips. My heart began to beat faster as I grabbed the frame and flipped the heavy bike upside down, resting it on its handlebars and seat. I looked at the bottom bracket where the serial number is usually stamped. There was a piece of silver duct tape stuck there, peeling at the edges. With trembling fingers, I picked at the corner of the tape and ripped it off. Underneath was not a serial number but a faded yellow registration sticker from the local township. It read, Property of Earl Johnson, 142 Magnolia Lane. I gasped and covered my mouth to stifle a scream. Mr. Johnson was our 70-year-old neighbor who lived 3 houses down. He had owned this blue Schwinn for as long as I could remember, riding it to the grocery store until his arthritis made it impossible last year. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. Chad had not bought me a used bike. He had not even gone to a thrift store or a pawn shop to spend $20 on a gift. He had walked down the street, likely seen Mr. Johnson's garage door open, and stolen an old man's property. Then he had dragged it back here, spray-painted it gray to hide the crime, and presented it to me as a gift from my wealthy aunt. I felt bile rise in my throat. They had not just stolen my Mercedes, they had made me an accessory to a crime. If I had ridden this bike to work as they suggested, Mr. Johnson or his family would have seen me. I would have been labeled a thief in the neighborhood where I grew up. They were setting me up to be humiliated or arrested while they drove around in my luxury car. I looked at the kitchen door where the sounds of their celebration were getting louder. They thought this was funny. They thought swapping a $180,000 vehicle for a stolen piece of junk was a harmless prank. But as I stared at Mr. Johnson's name on that sticker, something inside me shifted. The sadness evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I was done being the victim. I was a forensic accountant, and I had just found my first piece of physical evidence. I did not wait for the sun to rise. I left the stolen bicycle right there in the middle of my mother's living room, like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. I called a rideshare and watched the rain streak against the window as we drove toward the upscale subdivision where Tanisha and Chad lived. They called it a luxury estate, but I knew the truth. They were drowning in debt trying to keep up appearances in a house they could barely afford. I knew the code to their garage keypad. It was Tanisha's birthday, naturally, because the world revolved around her. I punched in the numbers, and the heavy metal door began to rumble upward, slowly revealing the contents of the garage. My heart was hammering in my throat. I expected to see the matte black Mercedes Aunt Verna had described. I was ready to see my name on the title in the glove box. I was ready to drive my property home. But as the garage door fully retracted, the breath was knocked out of my lungs. I stood there in the driveway, paralyzed by a mixture of horror and nausea. The vehicle sitting before me was indeed a Mercedes G-Wagon. The silhouette was unmistakable, boxy, powerful, and commanding. But it was no longer black. Tanisha had desecrated it. The entire car had been wrapped in a vinyl decal that was a blinding shade of bubblegum pink. It was aggressive, tacky, and completely overwhelming. But the color was not the worst part. Plastered across the driver's side door in glittering gold cursive letters were the words Tanisha's Boss Babe Nails, followed by her Instagram handle and a phone number. She had turned my $180,000 luxury SUV into a rolling billboard for her unlicensed basement nail salon. I walked closer, my hands shaking as I touched the hood. The vinyl wrap was cheap. I could see bubbles where it had been applied poorly, and the edges were already peeling near the wheel wells. She had taken a masterpiece of German engineering, a symbol of my hard work and success, and turned it into a clown car to promote her failing side hustle. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. I walked around the vehicle, inspecting the damage. There were fast food wrappers thrown on the floor of the passenger side. A half-empty Starbucks cup sat in the center console, staining the custom red leather with a ring of sticky syrup. In the back seat, I saw boxes of cheap nail polish and acetone, likely illegally imported, judging by the labels. They were treating my car like a storage unit. I looked at the odometer through the window. They had put over 800 miles on it in 2 weeks. They had been joyriding all over Atlanta, showing off a car they did not own, pretending to be successful while I took the bus to work. The sheer entitlement made me dizzy. Tanisha did not just want to use the car, she wanted to claim it. She wanted to erase me from the narrative completely. By branding it with her name, she was marking her territory, daring me to take it back. I gripped the door handle, ready to rip the door open and scream, but it was locked. I stood there in the dim light of the garage, staring at my own reflection in the gold lettering of her name, realizing that this was not just theft. This was an act of war. The side door of the house swung open, and Chad sauntered out into the driveway. He was wearing silk pajamas that I knew he could not afford, and holding a glass of red wine that he swirled pretentiously. He did not look guilty. He did not look afraid that I had caught them red-handed. Instead, he looked annoyed, like a parent dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum. He took a slow sip of his wine and leaned against the pink fender of my car, crossing his ankles casually. "Nia, you need to lower your voice," he said calmly, swirling his glass. "The neighbors are trying to sleep, and you are out here making a scene over nothing. It is very unbecoming of a professional woman." I stared at him, my mouth agape. "Nothing," I choked out, pointing at the gold lettering on the door. "You stole my car and turned it into a billboard for a pyramid scheme. This is Grand Theft Auto, Chad." Chad laughed, a low, condescending chuckle that made my blood boil. He shook his head, looking at me with pity. "You are so dramatic, Nia, always looking at the negative. This isn't theft. It is resource reallocation. Look, let us be realistic for a second." He pushed off the car and walked toward me, using his free hand to gesture wildly. "You work a 9-to-5 job. You sit in a cubicle looking at spreadsheets all day. Your biggest commute is to the grocery store. What is a girl like you going to do with a G-Wagon? It is a high-performance military-grade vehicle. It is designed for presence. It is designed for power. He took another sip of wine and stepped closer, invading my personal space. I am an entrepreneur, Naya. I am out here every day making deals, meeting with investors, building an empire. In my world, perception is reality. When I pull up in this truck, people take me seriously. It opens doors. It closes deals. This car is an asset in my hands. In your hands, it is just a liability. Do you have any idea how much fuel this beast consumes? It gets 12 miles to the gallon. Can you afford $300 a week in premium gas on your salary? I did not think so. I tried to interrupt him to tell him that I made 3 times his salary, but he held up a hand to silence me. I am doing you a favor, Nia. I am absorbing the depreciation. I am paying for the fuel. I am keeping the engine running, so the seals do not dry out. You should be thanking me for stewarding this asset for you, instead of coming here in the middle of the night acting crazy. This car is too much for you. Stick to the bicycle. It fits your tax bracket better. Now go home before I call the police and tell them you are trespassing on my property. He turned his back on me and patted the roof of my car affectionately, as if he were the one who had earned it. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling with adrenaline. I looked Chad dead in the eye and kept my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. You have 5 minutes to peel those ridiculous stickers off my car, I said, unlocking my screen. If you do not hand over the keys, I am calling the police. This is Grand Theft Auto, and I will press charges. Chad did not move, but Tanisha let out a screech that echoed off the concrete walls. She scrambled for her own phone, her fake nails clicking frantically against the glass screen. Do not you dare, Nia, she yelled. I am calling Mom. She hit the dial button and put it on speakerphone before I could even open my contacts. Mom. Nia is trying to have us arrested, Tanisha wailed, her voice pitching up into a hysterical sob that I knew was completely manufactured. She is at our house right now threatening to put Chad in handcuffs just because we borrowed the car for my business launch. She is crazy, Mom. She is trying to ruin my grand opening. The voice of Mama Louise boomed through the quiet garage, distorted by the speaker, but unmistakable in its authority. Nia, put the phone to your ear right now. I took the phone from Tanisha, my heart sinking. I thought that if I just explained the reality of the situation, my mother would finally see reason. Mom, they stole my car, I said, my voice cracking with desperation. They did not just borrow it. They painted it pink, Mom. They covered a $180,000 vehicle in cheap stickers. It is ruined. Aunt Verna is going to be furious. I expected her to be outraged. I expected her to defend me. Instead, she unleashed a torrent of anger that left me breathless. Nia, I raised you better than this, Mama Louise snapped. Since when did you become so selfish and petty? Your sister is trying to build a future. She is trying to launch a brand that will lift this family out of poverty. She needs that car to project success. You know how the beauty industry works? Image is everything. Who is going to trust a beauty boss who drives a Honda? She needs that G-Wagon to secure investors. But Mom, it is my car, I protested, tears of frustration hot in my eyes. It is titled to me. It is my property. Stop it, Nia, just stop it. She cut me off. You have a steady job. You have a paycheck every 2 weeks. You are comfortable while your sister and Chad are out there struggling to make ends meet. They are taking risks to build an empire, and instead of helping them, you are trying to tear them down out of jealousy. That car is just metal and rubber to you, but to them it is a lifeline. If you call the police on your own sister over a car, do not bother coming to Christmas dinner. Do not bother coming around at all. You will be dead to me. Do you hear me, Nia? You will be dead to this family. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the black screen. The silence in the driveway was deafening. Tanisha snatched her phone back, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. See, Nia, Mom agrees with us. She knows we are the ones with the real potential. She knows we actually need it. Chad laughed, shaking his head as if I were a foolish child. You really thought she would side with you, didn't you? Go home, Nia. Go ride your bike. We have work to do. He hit the button on the wall and the heavy garage door began to close, slowly shutting me out. I stood in the rain watching the pink bumper of my car disappear, knowing that I had not just lost an argument, I had lost my mother. The next morning I sat on the damp plastic seat of the city bus, holding my umbrella between my knees to keep it from dripping on my work shoes. My phone began to buzz in my pocket. It was not a call or a text, but a relentless stream of social media notifications. I unlocked the screen and saw that I had been tagged in a video over 50 times in the last hour. I clicked the link and my stomach dropped all the way to the floor. It was a TikTok live stream from Tanisha's account, and it was already trending on the local exploration page. The video opened with a close-up of the Mercedes steering wheel, focusing on the shining silver emblem. Then the camera flipped to reveal Tanisha sitting in the driver's seat of my car. She was wearing huge sunglasses and had filtered her face to perfection. The custom red leather seats that I had picked out specifically from the catalog were visible in the background. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, she chirped, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. I just had to jump on here and show you the surprise my hubby had waiting for me in the driveway this morning. She turned the camera to show Chad sitting in the passenger seat looking smug. He waved at the camera like a celebrity. Tanisha squealed with delight. You guys! Chad has been killing it in the crypto market lately and he said a boss babe needs a boss ride to match her energy. Look at this interior. It is custom red leather imported from Germany. Hard work really pays off, you guys. If you manifest your dreams and grind hard like we do, the universe rewards you. I watched in horror as the likes and comments rolled in by the thousands. People were commenting couple goals and queen energy. But then I saw the comments from people who actually knew us. My college roommate Jessica tagged me and wrote, "Wait, Nia, didn't your aunt say she was sending you a car?" Another friend from my accounting firm commented, "I thought Chad was borrowing money last week. How did he afford a G-Wagon?" Tanisha was deleting the negative comments as fast as she could, but she missed a few. The humiliation was suffocating. My own friends were confused, thinking I had lied about the gift or that I was jealous of my sister. Tanisha was publicly rewriting reality, taking credit for my career milestone and twisting it into a narrative about her husband's fake success. My thumb hovered over the comment section. I wanted to type the truth. I wanted to write that car belongs to me and they stole it. I wanted to post the photo of the registration with my name on it. But then my mother's voice echoed in my head. You will be dead to this family. If I exposed them publicly now, Tanisha would lose her followers, and Chad would be humiliated. My mother would never forgive me. She would paint me as the villain who destroyed her golden child's moment of fame. I felt a tear slide down my cheek as I watched Tanisha rev the engine of my car, the sound purring through the phone speakers. I turned off the screen and stared out the bus window at the gray, rainy street, feeling smaller and more powerless than I ever had in my life. I let them have the lie, because I was too afraid to tell the truth. The following Monday morning brought a torrential downpour that turned the streets of Atlanta into rivers of gray sludge. I stood by the window of my apartment watching the rain sheet against the glass. Usually, I would be safe inside my car with the heater on and the wipers rhythmically clearing my view. But my car was currently sitting in my sister's driveway, being used as a prop for her vanity. I looked at the rideshare app on my phone. The surge pricing was astronomical due to the weather. $35 for a 3-mile ride. I checked my bank account. I had enough money, but the voice of Chad echoed in my head, telling me I needed to save every penny to help the family. With a heavy sigh, I grabbed my raincoat and the helmet Aunt Verna had sent separately. I dragged the rusty mountain bike out onto the street. The chains squeaked loudly with every rotation of the pedals, a humiliating soundtrack to my commute. The rain lashed against my face, stinging my eyes. Cars zoomed past me, splashing dirty puddle water onto my work trousers. I felt small and pathetic. As I approached the steep hill that led toward the financial district, I gripped the handlebars tighter. The rubber grips were worn smooth and slippery from the rain. I picked up speed as the descent began. Gravity took over and the heavy steel frame of the bike accelerated faster than I anticipated. I squeezed the handbrakes to slow down. Nothing happened. The levers pulled all the way back to the handlebars with zero resistance. The cables were snapped or disconnected. Panic surged through my veins like ice water. I squeezed again harder, but the bike kept gaining speed. I was flying down the wet asphalt, completely out of control. A delivery truck was stopped at the red light at the bottom of the hill. I had two choices: hit the truck or swerve onto the sidewalk. I screamed and yanked the handlebars to the right. The bald tires lost traction on the slick pavement. The bike slid out from under me. I flew through the air for a terrifying second before slamming onto the concrete. I heard a sickening crack before I felt the pain. My left arm took the brunt of the impact. White-hot agony exploded in my forearm, radiating up to my shoulder. I rolled onto my back, gasping for air rain, mixing with the tears that instantly sprang to my eyes. My face throbbed where it had scraped against the rough sidewalk. A pedestrian ran over, screaming for someone to call 911. I lay there in the mud, unable to move my arm, realizing that Chad's gift had not just insulted me, it had physically broken me. He knew that bike was trash. He sent me out into traffic on a death trap. As the siren of an ambulance wailed in the distance, I looked at my twisted wrist and realized this was no accident. It was criminal negligence. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead, amplifying the throbbing pain in my left arm. My forearm was encased in a heavy plaster cast, and the left side of my face was covered in gauze where the pavement had shredded my skin. I had been lying there for 3 hours alone, staring at the water stain on the ceiling tiles. The nurses had been kind, offering me juice and sympathetic smiles, but every time the door opened, my heart jumped, hoping to see my mother. She never came. Instead, the curtain swept back and Tanisha breezed into the room. She was wearing a matching velour tracksuit and holding an iced coffee, her phone tucked under her ear. She did not rush to my bedside. She did not look horrified by my injuries. She looked annoyed, as if my accident had inconvenienced her schedule. She hung up her call and took a long sip of her drink, looking around the small room with disdain. "It smells like bleach and sick people in here." She wrinkled her nose. "I had to park 3 blocks away, Nia. You know I hate parallel parking." I swallowed the lump in my throat, fighting back tears of pain and disappointment. "I am okay, thanks for asking," I whispered sarcastically. "My arm is broken in 2 places, and I might need surgery on my shoulder." Tanisha waved her hand dismissively, walking closer to the bed. She peered down at my cast, then her eyes darted to my other arm, which was resting on the blanket, bruised but mobile. "So it is just the left arm." Then she asked, her tone practical and devoid of warmth. "Your right hand is fine. You can still type, right?" I stared at her, confused by the question. "Yes, my right hand works, Tanisha. Why does that matter?" Tanisha let out a sigh of relief that was chilling in its selfishness. "Oh, thank God. I was worried we were going to miss the deadline. Chad has been freaking out all morning. You need to come over tonight as soon as you are discharged and finish filing the quarterly tax returns for his LLC. The deadline is tomorrow and we cannot afford a penalty right now." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I am lying in a hospital bed, Tanisha," I said, my voice trembling. "I was in a traffic accident because of that death trap bicycle you gave me. I am in severe pain. I am not doing Chad's taxes tonight. I am going home to sleep." Tanisha's face hardened. She set her coffee down on the tray table with a sharp thud. "Don't be dramatic, Nia. You are sitting up. You are talking. It is just a broken arm, not a brain injury. Chad is under so much pressure right now trying to get this business off the ground. He does not have time to deal with the IRS. He needs you to support the family, not lie here feeling sorry for yourself." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "We need that tax refund, Nia. That money is earmarked for the marketing budget for my nail salon. If you miss this deadline, you are taking food out of our mouths. So ask the doctor for some strong painkillers, get an Uber and meet us at the house, and do not expect us to pay for the ride. We are tight on cash until that refund hits. She picked up her coffee and checked her reflection in the dark window, oblivious to the fact that she had just confirmed exactly what I was to them. I was not a sister. I was not a daughter. I was a utility appliance, and as long as my right hand worked, they did not care if the rest of me was shattered. The silence in the hospital room was broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor next to my bed. Tanisha had left an hour ago, leaving me with a list of tax forms to fill out, and a hollow feeling in my chest. I stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in my fractured arm. My phone vibrated against the plastic tray table. For a split second, a foolish part of me hoped it was Mama Louise calling to check on me, or maybe even Chad apologizing for sending me to work on a death trap bicycle. I picked up the phone and saw a notification from Chad. It was a photo followed by a text message. I opened the photo first. It was a close-up of a gas pump screen showing a total of $198. My stomach tightened. I scrolled down to read the message. It read, "Hey Nia, hope you are enjoying the downtime in the hospital. Must be nice to lay around all day. Listen, I just had to fill up the tank on the G-Wagon. I took a potential investor out for lunch and we drove around the city discussing big numbers. This beast is thirsty. Since the title is technically in your name, the operating costs are your responsibility. I put it on your emergency credit card, the one you gave Mom for groceries. Just wanted to let you know so you don't freak out when you see the statement. Thanks for being a team player." I dropped the phone on the bedsheet as if it were a burning coal. I could not breathe. He had not only stolen my car and bragged about it on social media, but now he was charging me for the privilege of him driving it. He was using the emergency credit card I had given my mother for food and medicine to fuel his joyrides. The audacity was so staggering that it almost didn't feel real. He genuinely believed that I existed solely to subsidize his delusions of grandeur. I closed my eyes and pictured him standing at the gas pump, probably wearing his fake designer sunglasses, feeling important as he filled up a luxury SUV he didn't own with money he didn't earn. He called it operating costs. He framed it as if he were a property manager sending an invoice to a landlord. But he was just a parasite. He had sent me to the hospital on a broken bicycle, and while I was getting my bones set, he was draining my bank account to impress a stranger. I looked at my cast, then back at the phone. The text message sat there, glowing in the dim light, a digital monument to his narcissism. He didn't ask. He didn't request. He informed. He felt entitled to my money just as he felt entitled to my car and my labor. At that moment, the sadness that had weighed me down for years began to evaporate. It was replaced by a cold clarity. They were never going to stop. If I gave them the tax refund, they would ask for the house. If I gave them the house, they would ask for my kidney. There was no bottom to their greed. I reached for my laptop bag with my good hand. I was not going to do his taxes. I was going to do an audit. And the first thing I was going to investigate was exactly how much of my life they had stolen. I stared at the pixelated image of the gas pump until the numbers blurred together. $198. Chad was not asking for a favor. He was issuing an invoice. In his twisted reality, I was not a victim of theft or negligence. I was simply the financier of his lifestyle, a silent partner whose only purpose was to absorb costs so he could project wealth. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud, dramatic break like the bone in my arm. It was a quiet, terrifying shift. The primitive part of my brain that desperately sought my mother's approval finally went silent. The hope that Tanisha would one day act like a sister evaporated. I realized with crystal clarity that they did not love me. They did not even like me. To them, I was not a person with feelings or dreams. I was an ATM machine that had temporarily malfunctioned. They were kicking me not because they were worried about the machine, but because they wanted the cash to keep dispensing. I looked at my reflection in the dark phone screen. My face was scraped, My hair was matted and my eyes were swollen. But behind that exhaustion, a cold, hard resolve was forming. I wiped the single tear from my cheek and did not let another one fall. I reached into my bag and pulled out my work laptop. Opening it with one hand was a struggle, but I managed to prop it open on the hospital tray table. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark room. I typed in my password, my fingers moving with a speed and precision that defied my injuries. I was done being Nia, the scapegoat daughter. I was done being Nia, the doormat sister. Tonight, I was Nia Williams, senior forensic accountant. In my line of work, I hunted people who thought they were smarter than the system. I tracked embezzlers who hid millions in offshore accounts and CEOs who cooked the books to hide their failures. Chad and Tanisha were amateurs compared to the sharks I swam with daily. They thought they could erase me. They thought that by stealing my car and breaking my body, they had rendered me powerless. They forgot that every thief leaves a paper trail. Every lie has a digital footprint. I opened a new spreadsheet and named it simply the audit. I cracked my knuckles on my good hand and felt a rush of adrenaline that masked the pain in my shoulder. They wanted to talk about operating costs. Fine. I was going to calculate the true cost of their betrayal down to the last penny. I logged into the credit bureau database and prepared to dig. I was not looking for forgiveness anymore. I was looking for evidence, and I knew exactly where to start. I opened the credit bureau portal and waited for the page to load. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs that it almost drowned out the hospital noises. The screen refreshed and I saw the number, 520. My breath hitched. 3 weeks ago, my credit score had been a pristine 810. I had spent years building that score, meticulously paying every bill early, keeping my utilization under 5%. It was my pride. It was my ticket to financial freedom. And in less than a month, they had destroyed it. I clicked on the alerts tab, my good hand shaking, as I scrolled through the red flags. Late payment on a credit card. Another late payment. Hard inquiry from a predatory lender. And then the final blow. A new secured loan account opened 6 days ago for $50,000. The lender was Quick Cash Title Loans, a company known for exorbitant interest rates and aggressive repossession tactics. The collateral listed for the loan was a 2024 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. I sat back against the thin hospital pillows, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. They had not just stolen the car to drive it, they had stolen it to pawn it. Chad had taken the title that was in my name, forged my signature, and used my property to secure a high-risk loan. He had cashed out $50,000 of equity from a gift I had not even touched yet. I navigated to the loan details. The contact email on the account was chadhustles@gmail.com, but the borrower name was Nia Williams. He was so arrogant, he didn't even bother to create a fake email address. He assumed I would never check. He assumed I would just keep paying the bills blindly like I always did. The first payment was due in 20 days. The interest rate was 28%. If I defaulted, they would repossess the car and come after me for the balance. I looked at my broken arm in the cast, then back at the screen. This was identity theft. This was bank fraud. This was a felony that carried a prison sentence of up to 30 years. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to call my mother and ask how to fix it. I did not feel the need to protect them. I took a screenshot of the loan document. Then I took a screenshot of the credit score. I saved them both into the folder named The Audit. The evidence was building and it was damning. I was no longer their sister or their daughter. I was the victim of a financial crime, and I was about to become their worst nightmare. I dialed the number listed on the credit report for Quick Cash Title Loans. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The hold music was a tinny loop of smooth jazz that seemed to mock the severity of the situation. After 5 agonizing minutes, a woman named Brenda answered. Her voice was bored and sounded like she was chewing gum. "Thank you for calling Quick Cash, where your title is your treasure. Can I have your account number, please?" I took a deep breath and channeled my most authoritative courtroom voice. I do not have my account number handy, Brenda. My name is Nia Williams. I am calling to verify the details of a recent loan opened under my social security number. I gave her my information, expecting a fight. I expected her to tell me that I was not authorized or that I needed a password. Instead, she simply clicked a few keys and said, "Oh yes, Ms. Williams, I see the account right here. Approved 5 days ago for $50,000. Is there a problem with the disbursement?" My stomach dropped. It was that easy. Chad had used my personal information so seamlessly that I was already in the system as a valued customer. "No," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I just need a copy of the original signed loan agreement and the lien release document sent to my email immediately for my records. I want to review the terms before the first payment date." Brenda yawned. "Sure thing, honey. Sending it to the email on file now. chadhustles@gmail.com. Right?" "No," I snapped. "That email is no longer active. Send it to this address instead." I gave her my secure work email. A minute later, a notification pinged on my laptop. I opened the PDF attachment, and there it was. The smoking gun. The document was titled Secured Promissory Note and Security Agreement. I scrolled past the exorbitant 28% interest rate and the aggressive repossession clauses until I found the section labeled Collateral Description. I felt the blood drain from my face. Listed right there in black and white was the vehicle identification number ending in 4921. 2024 Mercedes-Benz G550. Matte black. Mileage 42. He had not just borrowed the car. He had leaned it. He had handed over the title of a $180,000 vehicle to a predatory lender in exchange for a quick $50,000 check. I stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of horror and professional fascination. Chad had effectively sold the ownership rights of my car to a third party. If I missed a single payment, Quick Cash Title Loans had the legal right to send a tow truck to Tanisha's house and drag my gift away. They could sell it at auction to cover the debt, and I would be left with nothing but a ruined credit score. He had cashed out the equity of my gift before I had even touched the steering wheel. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was a calculated financial extraction. I saved the document to my audit folder and zoomed in on the bottom of the page where the signatures were located. It was time to see exactly how far he had gone to steal my life. I sat up straighter in the hospital bed, ignoring the sharp twinge in my broken arm. The glow of the laptop screen illuminated the dark room as I navigated to page 4 of the loan agreement. This was the signature page, the place where a binding legal contract is sealed. My eyes locked onto the bottom line where the borrower acknowledges the debt. There, written in blue ink, was the name Nia Williams. I zoomed in until the pixels began to blur. It was a forgery, but it was not even a good one. The slant was wrong. The loops on the W were too wide and theatrical. I have a tight, precise signature developed over years of signing audit reports. This signature was loopy and arrogant. It looked like someone had tried to trace my signature from a birthday card, but got bored halfway through and decided to improvise. Chad had signed my name with the same careless entitlement he used to drive my car. But then my eyes drifted to the line below it labeled guarantor. My blood ran cold. Since the car was a gift and the title transfer had not been fully processed at the DMV, due to Tanisha holding on to the paperwork, the loan company required the original purchaser to sign off. There, in shaky black ink, was the signature Verna Jenkins. I audibly gasped. Chad had not just forged my name, he had forged the signature of one of the most powerful real estate developers in Atlanta. He had impersonated Aunt Verna. I looked at the witness line next to it. It was signed by Tanisha Williams. My sister had witnessed her husband committing a felony and signed her name to verify it. My forensic brain kicked into high gear, bypassing the emotional shock. I began to categorize the crimes in my head. Forging a signature on a private contract is fraud. But submitting that forged document to a lending institution to obtain funds is federal bank fraud under Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1344. Because the loan amount exceeded $10,000 and involved interstate commerce, this was no longer a local police matter. This was FBI territory. I looked at the document again, analyzing the pen strokes. They had likely used a lightbox or a window to trace the signatures onto the paper before scanning it. It was premeditated. They had sat at their kitchen table, probably drinking wine and laughing, while they committed a crime that carried a maximum sentence of 30 years in federal prison. They thought they were just being clever, gaming the system to get quick cash. They did not realize they had just handed me a nuclear weapon. I saved the document to 3 different cloud servers and a secure external drive. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years they had called me boring. They mocked my job, saying I was just a bean counter while they were entrepreneurs. But beans do not send people to prison. Evidence does. I looked at Chad's sloppy forgery one last time. He wanted to be a big-shot businessman. Well, he had just signed a contract that was going to cost him a lot more than money. He had signed away his freedom. My forensic audit was far from over. I minimized the window with the forged loan documents and opened a new browser tab, navigating to the local Atlanta news station's homepage. In my line of work, I knew that financial crimes rarely happened in a vacuum. People who were desperate enough to commit bank fraud were usually trying to cover up other mistakes. I scrolled through the crime blotter, looking for anything that happened on Saturday night, the same night the GPS tracker showed my car parked at the Velvet Lounge until 2 in the morning. My eyes scanned past headlines about petty thefts and zoning disputes until I froze. There it was, in bold red letters halfway down the page. Police seek public assistance, identifying suspect in Midtown, hit and run. I clicked the link, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. The article described a collision that occurred at 2:15 on Sunday morning at the intersection of 10th and Piedmont, just blocks away from the nightclub. A driver had run a red light, smashing into a parked delivery van before fleeing the scene at high speed. Witnesses described the suspect vehicle as a large black luxury SUV, possibly a Mercedes or a Range Rover, with significant damage to the rear passenger side bumper. I stopped breathing. The timeline matched perfectly. Chad had come stumbling into the house at 3 in the morning on Sunday, smelling of stale bourbon and cheap cologne. The next afternoon, when I asked him about the deep scratch and dent on the rear bumper of the G-Wagon, he had flown into a rage. He told me that some idiot at the grocery store had rammed a shopping cart into it while he was buying milk. I had believed him because I was used to believing their lies. But shopping carts do not leave transfer paint. Shopping carts do not crumble heavy German steel. I closed my eyes and pictured the damage on my car again. The dent was high up on the bumper, consistent with hitting a delivery van, not a low-lying shopping cart. The taillight was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. He had hit that van while driving drunk, and instead of stopping to take responsibility, he had floored the accelerator and ran. He had committed a hit-and-run felony, leaving a scene of destruction behind him just to protect his fragile reputation. The realization made me nauseous. Chad was not just a thief and a fraudster. He was a coward who put innocent lives at risk. If there had been someone in that delivery van, he could have killed them. And he did it all in a vehicle registered to my name. If the police identified the car from traffic cameras, they would not come looking for Chad. They would come looking for me. I would be the one facing charges for leaving the scene of an accident. I navigated to the police tip line page. I did not submit the tip yet, but I copied the case number and the detective's contact information into my audit file. I was building a case that was airtight. He had tried to frame me for his crimes, but he was about to learn that forensic accountants do not just find the money, we find the truth. A timeline was a good start, but in a court of law, it was just a theory. I needed irrefutable proof that placed Chad behind the wheel at the exact moment of impact. I closed the police report and picked up my phone, dialing a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Marcus was a former narcotics detective who had pivoted to private investigation after a department scandal. We had worked together on a massive corporate embezzlement case, where his surveillance skills and my forensic accounting had brought down a corrupt CEO. He picked up on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep. "Nia, it is 3 in the morning," he groaned. "Unless you are calling to tell me you have a lead on the flight risk client I am hunting, I am hanging up." I kept my voice low and urgent. "I need a favor, Marcus. A big one. I need eyes on the parking lot of the Velvet Lounge from last Saturday night. Specifically the security feed between 1 and 3 in the morning. I am looking for a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon." Marcus paused the line silent for a moment. "That is a specific request, Nia. You know extracting private security footage without a warrant is a gray area." I cut him off. "I am not asking you to break the law, Marcus. I am asking you to use those connections you always brag about. The bouncer at the Velvet Lounge owes you right. Just get me the file. I will handle the rest." He sighed, the sound of a lighter clicking audible in the background. "Give me an hour, but this wipes the slate clean for that favor I owe you." 45 minutes later, my inbox pinged with a secure file transfer. My hands trembled as I clicked the download link. The video player opened, revealing a grainy black and white view of the nightclub's VIP parking area. The timestamp in the top right corner read 2:08 a.m. The lot was crowded with patrons stumbling out after last call, but my eyes went instantly to the massive SUV parked illegally near the entrance. The driver's side door swung open and Chad stepped into the frame. He was a mess. Even in low resolution, I could see him swaying on his feet. He leaned heavily against the car door, fumbling with his pockets. He dropped his keys on the asphalt and nearly toppled over trying to retrieve them. He was visibly, aggressively intoxicated. He finally managed to unlock the door and hauled himself into the driver's seat. The brake lights flared blindingly white in the camera's night vision mode. Without checking his mirrors or turning on his headlights, he slammed the vehicle into reverse, narrowly missing a group of girls in heels before peeling out of the lot. The timestamp when he exited the frame was 2:12 a.m. The hit and run occurred 3 blocks away at 2:15. I had him. I wasn't just speculating anymore. I was watching a felony in progress. I saved the video to my encrypted drive right next to the forged loan documents. The trap was set, and it was time to snap it shut. The discharge nurse had told me to go home and rest, but I knew I could not relax until I had my physical files. I took a cab to my mother's house, intending to grab my backup hard drive and a few changes of clothes before checking into a hotel. The house was dark when I arrived. The rain had finally stopped, leaving a heavy mist clinging to the magnolia trees in the front yard. I unlocked the front door quietly, my cast making it difficult to turn the key without scraping the metal. I stepped into the foyer expecting the house to be empty since Tanisha had said they were all at her place working on the tax deadline. But the house was not empty. A sliver of light spilled out from the kitchen doorway, casting a long shadow across the hallway floor. I heard a low, hushed voice drifting through the silence. It was Mama Louise. I froze, my hand hovering over the light switch. There was something in her tone that stopped me cold. It wasn't her usual loud, complaining voice. It was sharp, conspiratorial, and urgent. I crept closer, pressing my back against the wall just outside the kitchen archway, holding my breath. "You need to listen to me, Tanisha," Mama Louise hissed into the phone. "Stop crying and think. You cannot leave those papers lying around on the counter. If Nia comes over there and sees the logo for Quick Cash Title Loans, she is going to ask questions. You know how she is. She acts like a detective with every receipt. You need to hide them in the bottom of the safe." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. My mother knew. She knew about the predatory loan. She knew they had pawned my car. I waited, hoping she would scold Tanisha, hoping she would demand they return the money, but her next words shattered my heart into a million irreparable pieces. "And tell Chad to stop checking that crypto app every 5 minutes." Mama continued, her voice dropping lower. "If Nia finds out he took that $50,000 and dumped it into some digital coin scheme, she will flip. Just keep her distracted. Tell her the car is in the shop for detailing. Tell her whatever you have to. Just buy Chad enough time to double the money so he can pay off the loan before she notices. She is soft, Tanisha. She is desperate for my approval. I can handle her. I just need you to keep your mouth shut. I backed away slowly, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. The pain in my broken arm was nothing compared to the agony radiating from my chest. My mother was not a helpless old woman being manipulated by her greedy son-in-law. She was the ringleader. She knew Chad had stolen my identity. She knew he had gambled $50,000 of my credit on volatile cryptocurrency. And worst of all, she was weaponizing my love for her against me. She knew I was desperate for her approval, and she was using that vulnerability to blind me while they robbed me blind. I stood in the dark hallway staring at the family photos on the wall. Pictures of me graduating college, pictures of me buying this house for her. They were all lies. To her, I was not a daughter. I was just a resource to be harvested until I was dry. The hope I had held on to for 35 years, the hope that maybe one day she would love me as much as she loved Tanisha, vanished in that moment. I turned around and walked out the front door, leaving my keys on the table. I did not slam the door. I closed it softly, sealing the tomb of my childhood behind me. I had no mother anymore. I was an orphan with a plan, and I was about to burn their house of cards to the ground. I drove straight to the glass and steel skyscraper in downtown Atlanta, where Aunt Verna ran her commercial real estate empire. My cast throbbed, and my clothes were still damp from the rain, but I walked past the receptionist with a cold determination I had never felt before. Aunt Verna was in the middle of a conference call, but one look at my face, and she hung up the phone immediately. She saw the broken arm, the bruises, and the dead look in my eyes. She did not offer me a hug or a tissue. She simply pointed to the leather chair opposite her mahogany desk and waited. I did not waste time with tears. I opened my laptop and slid it across the polished wood. I walked her through the folder labeled "The Audit" with the clinical precision of a prosecutor. I showed her the credit report with the $50,000 lien from Quick Cash Title Loans. I showed her the digital copy of the loan agreement, zooming in on the clumsy forgery of her own signature. I played the security footage of Chad stumbling drunk into my car and cross-referenced it with the police report of the hit and run. Finally, I played the audio recording I had captured on my phone of Mama Louise telling Tanisha to hide the evidence. As Aunt Verna watched the footage of Chad nearly running over pedestrians, her jaw tightened until a muscle jumped in her cheek. But when she saw her own name forged on the loan document, she stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city. The silence in the room was heavy and dangerous. "They committed federal bank fraud," she said, her voice low and trembling with controlled rage. "They used my name to steal from you, and your mother knows. She knows, and she is helping them cover it up." She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "I am calling the district attorney right now. I know the prosecutor personally. By tonight, Chad will be in a holding cell, and your mother and sister will be facing conspiracy charges." She reached for the landline on her desk, but I reached out with my good hand and covered hers, stopping her. "No, Aunt Verna," I said, my voice steady. "If we arrest them tonight, they will spin it. Mom will clutch her chest and fake a heart attack. Tanisha will go on TikTok and cry about how her wealthy aunt and jealous sister are bullying a struggling Black family. They will play the victim card, and half the internet will believe them. They will become martyrs. I do not want them to just go to jail. I want them to be destroyed." Aunt Verna paused, her hand hovering over the phone. She looked at me with a new level of respect. "What do you have in mind?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "They want to be famous," I said. "They want everyone to think they are rich and successful. So let us give them a stage. The annual charity gala is this Saturday. You bought a table, right? Invite them. Invite. Let them come dressed in their fake finery. Let them think they have won. And then in front of all of their investors and friends, we drop the hammer." A slow, cruel smile spread across Aunt Verna's face. She slowly withdrew her hand from the phone and sat back down. "You are absolutely right," she said. "A private arrest is too good for them. They love the spotlight, so let us give them a show they will never forget. She tapped her fingernail on the desk. Go home, Nia. Act like you know nothing. Let them think you are the same submissive doormat they have always walked on. Because when we pull the rug out from under them on Saturday, I want to see the look on their faces when they realize it is over. We shook hands not as family, but as partners in a calculated demolition. The audit was finished. Now it was time for the execution. I returned to my mother's house the next evening, playing the role they expected of me. I walked with a slump in my shoulders, clutching my broken arm, and keeping my eyes on the floor. To them, I was just defeated Nia, the broken appliance that had finally stopped making noise. I sat at the kitchen table silently filling out the tax forms with my right hand, while Tanisha ignored me and scrolled through Instagram. The atmosphere was tense, but it shifted instantly when the doorbell rang. It was not a regular mailman, but a private courier in a uniform holding a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with gold wax. Tanisha snatched it from the courier's hand before he could even ask for a signature. She tore it open with greedy fingers and gasped. "It is from Aunt Verna," she shrieked. "It is an invitation to her annual Christmas charity gala at the St. Regis Hotel. This is the most exclusive event in Atlanta. Tickets are $5,000 a plate." She pulled out the heavy cardstock invitation, and a smaller handwritten note fell onto the counter. Chad walked in from the living room, drawn by the smell of money. "What is it?" he asked, snatching the note. He read it aloud, a slow grin spreading across his face. "It says, Chad and Tanisha, I may have been too harsh on you. I have been watching your business moves and I am impressed by your tenacity. I would like to introduce you to some of my colleagues, real estate moguls and venture capitalists who are looking for high-yield crypto opportunities. Please come as my VIP guests." He paused and flipped the card over. And there is a postscript. It says, "Chad, please bring the G-Wagon and park it in the VIP circle out front. I want these investors to see that you are a man of taste and success. Appearance is everything in this business, so make sure it shines." Chad threw his head back and laughed a loud, triumphant sound that made my skin crawl. "I knew it," he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "I knew she would come around. Verna recognizes game. She sees the hustle. She knows I am the real deal." He turned to Tanisha, grabbing her by the waist. "Baby, get your best dress ready. We are going to the big leagues. Verna is going to hook us up with millions in capital. We are going to be rich, rich." Tanisha squealed, jumping up and down. "Oh my God, finally. I am going to be the star of the night." But wait, she stopped, looking worried. "What about the dent on the bumper? And the pawn shop has the spare key." Chad waved her off. "Don't worry about it. I bought some touch-up paint and buffed it out. You can hardly see it at night. And as for the loan, I will double that money in the market by next week and pay it off before anyone notices. We are golden." I sat there quietly, pretending to focus on the tax forms so they would not see the cold satisfaction in my eyes. They had swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. Aunt Verna knew exactly how to manipulate a narcissist. You do not fight them, you feed their ego until they choke on it. Chad was so blinded by the promise of validation and easy money that he did not question why a woman who threatened to arrest him 3 days ago was suddenly his biggest fan. He was going to drive a stolen leaned vehicle with a hit-and-run record directly into a trap filled with the most powerful people in the city. And I was going to have a front-row seat. I walked into the federal building downtown, not as a visitor, but as a colleague. The security guard at the front desk nodded at me, recognizing my face from the months I spent auditing a major money laundering scheme for the Bureau last year. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, where the white-collar crimes division was housed. The air was cool and smelled of stale coffee and printer toner, a scent that usually calmed me. Today, however, my stomach was twisting in knots. I was about to do something from which there was no return. I was about to hand over my own family to the federal government. Special Agent Miller was waiting for me in Conference Room B. We had a history of successful convictions together. He respected my work because I was thorough, and I respected him because he was by the book. I closed the door behind me and locked it, ensuring total privacy. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I pulled the encrypted hard drive from my bag and placed it on the metal table between us. It is all there. David? I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. The completed audit. Agent Miller plugged the drive into his secure laptop. He opened the files one by one, his face remaining impassive, as he scrolled through the evidence I had compiled. He reviewed the forged loan documents from Quick Cash Title Loans. He examined the side-by-side comparison of Aunt Verna's real signature versus the shaky forgery Chad had traced. He watched the security footage from the Velvet Lounge and read the police report regarding the hit and run. Finally, he listened to the audio recording of my mother instructing Tanisha to hide the evidence. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "This is airtight, Nia," he said quietly. "You have given us everything. We have bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. The loan amount meets the threshold for federal prosecution. Plus, with the hit and run, the local police will be happy to tack on felony evasion." He looked at me with a mixture of professional admiration and personal concern. "You know what happens next, right? Once I file this, there is no taking it back. Your brother-in-law is looking at 10 to 15 years. Your sister could get 5 as an accomplice." I looked down at my cast, the physical reminder of their negligence. I thought about the text message charging me for gas while I lay in a hospital bed. I thought about my mother choosing a thief over her own daughter. I looked Agent Miller in the eye and nodded. "I know exactly what I am doing," I said. "They are dangerous, David. They are escalating. If we do not stop them now, they will hurt someone else. They have already hurt me." Agent Miller nodded solemnly. He typed a few commands into his terminal. "I am issuing the arrest warrants now. We can pick them up at their residence tonight." I shook my head quickly. "No," I said. "Do not go to the house. If you go there, they will cause a scene or try to destroy the laptop with the crypto wallet. They are attending the charity gala at the St. Regis this Saturday. They will be arriving in the stolen vehicle. You can secure the car and the suspects in one move without risking a standoff." Agent Miller raised an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. "A public takedown. It minimizes the flight risk and maximizes the recovery of assets. It is a solid tactical decision." He printed out the warrants and signed them with a heavy scratching sound that echoed in the quiet room. It was done. The legal machinery was in motion. I walked out of the federal building into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had not just snitched on my family. I had finally stood up for the victim they had been abusing for decades. Myself. The circular driveway of the St. Regis Hotel was a parade of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys, but none commanded attention quite like the matte black Mercedes G-Wagon as it rumbled to a stop. The valet stepped forward to open the door, and Chad stepped out onto the red carpet. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket and scanned the crowd with the arrogant smirk of a man who believed he had finally arrived. He tossed the keys to the valet without even looking at him, a gesture of practiced dismissal that he had likely studied from movies. Tanisha emerged from the passenger side in a cloud of expensive perfume. She was wearing a floor-length gold-sequined gown that shimmered under the flashbulbs of the event photographers. It was a stunning dress. It was also a stolen dress purchased 3 days ago using the cash advance from the predatory title loan. She grabbed Chad's arm and posed for the cameras, flashing her teeth in a smile that was too wide and too desperate. To the casual observer, they looked like the perfect power couple, young, black, and fabulously wealthy. They walked up the grand staircase toward the ballroom entrance, their heads held high. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers cast a golden glow over the titans of Atlanta industry. Real estate moguls, tech billionaires, and politicians mingled with champagne flutes in hand. Chad puffed out his chest, strutting through the crowd. He nodded at people he did not know, acting as if he were greeting old friends. He leaned into Tanisha and whispered loudly enough for passers-by to hear that this was just the beginning for them. He had no idea that every eye in the room was not looking at him with admiration, but with curiosity about why a man with a pending felony warrant was drinking their champagne. They were peacocks, strutting in a lion's den, convinced that their painted feathers would protect them from the teeth waiting in the shadows. Chad cornered a group of silver-haired investors near the towering ice sculpture, his champagne glass dangerously tilted. He was speaking loud enough for half the room to hear his voice booming with unearned confidence. "You see that matte black truck out front, gentlemen? That is a custom build. My aunt-in-law Verna Jenkins commissioned it specifically for me. She told me, Chad, you are the only man in this family with the vision to carry on my legacy. She knows I am the future." The investors nodded politely, their eyes darting around looking for an escape route from this loud stranger in a rental tuxedo. But Chad did not notice their discomfort. He was too drunk on his own fantasy. He took a large gulp of champagne and spun around, scanning the room for his next audience. His eyes landed on me. I was standing in the shadows near a heavy velvet drape, wearing a simple black dress that fit over my cast. I looked small and injured, the complete opposite of the glittering crowd around us. A cruel smirk spread across Chad's face. He excused himself from the investors and sauntered over to me, weaving slightly as he walked. "Well, well, well," he sneered, looking me up and down with open disdain. "Look who they let in. I am surprised security didn't direct you to the service entrance, Nia. You look like a charity case with that cast. It really ruins the aesthetic of the evening, don't you think?" He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive alcohol and cheap lies. I stayed silent, gripping my clutch bag with my good hand. I did not want to spook him before the trap snapped shut. My silence only emboldened him. He laughed, shaking his head. "You know, it is actually sad, Nia. You work so hard, following all the rules, paying your little bills on time, and look where it got you. Broken and alone in the corner, watching the real players run the game. Aunt Verna finally woke up and realized you are a dead-end investment. That is why she gave me the car. That is why she invited me to the VIP table. She backs winners, Nia, and you are a born loser." He poked my good shoulder with a finger. "Enjoy the free shrimp cocktail while you can. It is the closest you will ever get to this lifestyle. Once I close these deals tonight, Tanisha and I are going to be on a different level. We won't have time for your little dramas anymore. You should probably ask the valet to bring your bike around now before it starts raining again." He threw his head back and laughed at his own joke, turning his back on me to chase down a waiter with a tray of crab cakes. He had no idea that the waiter was actually an undercover federal agent, and that the valet he mocked was currently handing the keys to his stolen chariot over to the FBI evidence recovery team. I watched him walk away, and for the first time in my life I did not feel small. I felt like the executioner watching a condemned man eat his final meal. Just as Chad swallowed his crab cake, a sharp, crystalline ringing sound cut through the chatter of the ballroom. Aunt Verna was standing on the low stage at the front of the room, tapping her silver spoon against her champagne flute. The room fell silent, the murmurs of business deals and gossip fading away. All eyes turned to the stage. Aunt Verna smiled, but it was not her usual warm hostess smile. It was the predatory grin of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. She leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the charity auction, I have a special presentation. We talk a lot about investment and the future in this room. Tonight, I want to invite my niece, Nia Williams, to the stage. She is a senior forensic accountant, and she has prepared some very interesting financial data that I think our investors, specifically those interested in the crypto market, need to see." Chad froze mid-chew. He looked at Tanisha and smirked, assuming this was some sort of family tribute speech. He probably thought I was going to publicly apologize for the car dispute or thank him for his visionary leadership. He whispered something to Tanisha, and they both giggled, covering their mouths with their hands. They were so confident, so utterly oblivious to the sword hanging over their heads. I walked out of the shadows, my plaster cast gleaming stark white under the harsh stage lights. The click of my heels on the marble floor echoed in the silence. I climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately. I did not look down. I did not slouch. I walked with the spine of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I took the microphone from Aunt Verna's hand. Her fingers brushed mine and she gave me a nearly imperceptible wink before stepping back to give me the floor. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the confused expressions of the wealthy elites. I saw my mother sitting at the VIP table looking nervous, clutching her pearls. And I found Chad instantly. He was raising his glass to me, mocking me one last time from across the room. I took a deep breath. My voice did not shake. It rang out clear and cold over the speakers, amplified to reach every corner of the ballroom. I said, "Excuse the interruption, everyone. My brother-in-law Chad just finished telling me that I belong in the corner because I am not a risk-taker. He told me that he represents the future of this family, and that I am just a relic of the past." I paused, letting the silence stretch, until the air in the room felt thin. I looked him dead in the eye and saw his smirk falter for the first time. And you know what? Chad is absolutely right. He is the future. So I decided to use my professional skills to give you all a preview of exactly what that future looks like. I clicked the remote control in my hand. The massive projection screen behind me descended from the ceiling. It did not show the charity logo or a festive holiday image. It showed a single word in giant blood-red letters, Audit, followed by the name Chad Hustles, LLC. The massive projection screen behind me flickered once before revealing a sharp split-screen image. On the left was a live feed of the matte black Mercedes G-Wagon, sitting proudly in the valet circle of the St. Regis. On the right was a crime scene photo from my accident, focusing on the rusty mountain bike, with its twisted frame and severed brake cables lying in a heap on the wet sidewalk. A murmur rippled through the ballroom as the elite guests tried to connect the dots between the two vehicles. I pointed at the screen, my voice ringing out steel and cold. "Ladies and gentlemen, in finance, we often talk about asset allocation. Chad here executed a fascinating asset transfer last week. He unilaterally confiscated my $180,000 vehicle, claiming he needed it to build his image as a successful entrepreneur. In exchange, he generously left me with the transportation method on the right." I paused and looked directly at Chad, whose face was draining of color, the wine glass in his hand beginning to tremble. But the most interesting part is not the disparity in value. It is the provenance of that bicycle. I checked the neighborhood security cameras. This bike was not a gift. Chad sneaked into the garage of Mr. Johnson, our 70-year-old neighbor, and stole it from his scrap pile. "You stole a broken bicycle from an elderly man to trade for the right to drive my Mercedes. Is that your definition of success?" The room gasped. Snickers of derision erupted from the VIP tables. To this crowd, financial fraud might be a game, but petty theft from the elderly was a character stain that could not be washed out. They began to look at Chad, not as a potential mogul, but as a cheap grifter in a rented tuxedo. Chad started to stand up to object, but Tanisha yanked him back down, her eyes wide with panic. I continued the assault without mercy. "You knew the brakes were broken. You knew it was raining heavily, yet you forced me to use it so you could drive my car to meet imaginary investors. The result of this trade is my broken arm and the total collapse of your character. You are looking at a man willing to send his own family member to their death just for a little bit of borrowed clout. And this is just the appetizer for tonight's feast of truth." I clicked the remote in my hand, advancing to the next slide where the numbers would begin to tell a much more devastating story. I pressed the next button on the remote, and the screen shifted from the grim crime scene photo to a bright, hyper-saturated video player. The sound of an upbeat pop song blasted through the ballroom speakers, causing several elderly investors to jump in their seats. Then Tanisha's voice rang out, amplified and distorted, but unmistakably shrill. "Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Look what my amazing hubby got me." The video loop played on the massive screen showing Tanisha twirling in front of the G-Wagon. In the video, the car was covered in cheap neon pink decals that spelled out Boss Babe and Hustle Queen. She was slapping the hood with her long acrylic nails, screaming about how hard work pays off. The juxtaposition between the elegant black tie crowd and the tacky, desperate display on the screen was excruciating. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the room. People were covering their mouths not to hide their shock, but to hide their amusement. They were laughing at her, not with her. I let the video loop twice before pausing it on a close-up of Tanisha's face filtered to oblivion. I turned to the audience, my voice cutting through their laughter like a knife. This is my sister Tanisha. In this video, which currently has 50,000 views, she claims this vehicle is a reward for her business acumen. She claims it is a gift from her husband. But let us look at the facts. I pointed to the pink lettering on the car door in the freeze frame. This is not branding. This is vandalism. This vehicle is a limited edition G550 with a matte night black magno finish. The paint job alone costs more than Chad's entire wardrobe, and Tanisha decided to cover it with $20 vinyl stickers she bought from a craft store. When I tried to remove them, the cheap adhesive stripped the clear coat right off the door. I looked down at Tanisha, who was now sinking lower in her chair trying to hide behind a floral centerpiece. You told your followers you were customizing it, Tanisha. You told them you were elevating the brand. But in the eyes of the law, you were defacing property that does not belong to you. You took a masterpiece of German engineering and turned it into a billboard for a pyramid scheme that does not even exist yet. I walked to the edge of the stage looking down at her. You wanted to be famous, Tanisha. You wanted everyone to look at you. Well, look around. Everyone is looking. But they do not see a boss babe. They see a woman who has to fake her lifestyle because she lacks the talent to build a real one. You destroyed my property for likes on the internet. And the saddest part is you thought no one would notice the difference between class and trash. The room fell deadly silent again, the laughter dying out as the reality of my words sank in. I was not just embarrassing her. I was dismantling her entire identity piece by piece. I clicked the remote again, ready to deliver the next blow. The laughter in the room died instantly as I clicked the remote one more time. The bright pink images of the defaced car vanished, replaced by a stark white document filled with dense legal text. I could hear the collective intake of breath from the front row where the bankers and lawyers sat. They recognized the format immediately. It was a secured promissory note. I pressed a button, and the screen zoomed in violently on the bottom half of the page, isolating the signature block. Now we leave the realm of bad taste and enter the jurisdiction of the federal government, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. This document details a $50,000 high-interest loan taken out against the title of the Mercedes G-Wagon. The date is from 5 days ago. As you can see, the borrower listed is Nia Williams, and the guarantor listed is Verna Jenkins. I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at Aunt Verna. Aunt Verna, did you sign this document? Verna stood up slowly, her face a mask of stone. She looked at the screen, then at Chad. I have never seen that piece of paper in my life, she said, clearly loud enough for the back of the room to hear. And that scribbled mess next to my name is an insult to my penmanship. I turned back to the crowd. You heard her, and I certainly did not sign it. What you are looking at is forgery. But because this document was submitted to a lending institution to obtain funds across state lines, it is not just forgery. It is federal bank fraud under Title 18 United States Code Section 1344. It is also aggravated identity theft. I looked at Chad. He was no longer smirking. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Sweat was beading on his forehead, dripping down his nose and spotting his rental tuxedo. He looked like a trapped animal. He started to stand up, his legs shaking, but he sank back down when he realized every single person in the room was staring at him with disgust. You wanted capital, Chad? I continued, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. You wanted to play with the big boys. Well, you got your wish. You took out a $50,000 loan in my name, and you spent it all on volatile cryptocurrency in less than 48 hours. You gambled my credit score and Aunt Verna's reputation on a digital coin toss. And you lost. I pointed at the screen where the jagged loops of the fake signatures loomed over him like a sentence. You didn't just steal a car, you stole my identity. You tried to ruin my financial future to fund your delusions of grandeur. You thought because I was your quiet sister-in-law that I would just absorb the debt to keep the peace. You thought I would be too afraid to speak up. But you forgot one thing, Chad. I am a forensic accountant. Finding the truth is not just my job, it is my specialty. And tonight, the audit is closed. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. The social execution was complete. Now it was time for the legal one. I pressed the button on the remote one final time. The image of the forged loan document vanished, replaced by the grainy, high-contrast footage from the Velvet Lounge security camera. The timestamp in the upper corner read 2:15 in the morning on Sunday. The room went deathly still. Even the waiters stopped moving. On the screen, the massive dark shape of the G-Wagon lurched backward. It slammed violently into the parked delivery van, the impact visible even in the low-resolution video. Glass shattered. The van rocked on its suspension. But instead of stopping, the G-Wagon paused for a split second, gears grinding before tearing out of the parking lot, leaving a trail of debris behind. I turned to face the audience, the light from the projector casting a long shadow across the stage. You all saw the dent on the rear bumper when you walked in tonight, I said, my voice calm and deadly. Chad told me a shopping cart hit it at the grocery store. He told his wife it was a minor scratch from a parking garage pillar. I walked to the edge of the stage, looming over Chad. He was shaking his head, mouthing the word "no" over and over, his eyes wide with terror. But shopping carts do not leave transfer paint high up on the chassis, I continued. And pillars do not call 911. What you just watched is a felony. It is called leaving the scene of an accident. And because the damage exceeds $500 and you were visibly intoxicated on camera, it is an aggravated charge. I gestured to the frozen image of the car speeding away. You did not just damage my property, Chad. You endangered lives. You drove drunk through the streets of Atlanta in a vehicle registered to my name. You tried to make me an accessory to your crime. You thought if you hid the damage and lied to my face, the problem would go away. But forensic evidence does not forget. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces, ensuring every investor in the room understood exactly who they were dealing with. The Atlanta Police Department has been looking for a black Mercedes SUV involved in a hit-and-run all week. They have been checking body shops. They have been checking street cameras. But they could not find the driver because he was hiding in my sister's driveway. I looked back at Chad, who was now slumped in his chair looking like a deflated balloon. You wanted to be a person of interest, Chad. You wanted everyone to know your name. Well, congratulations. I forwarded this footage to the precinct 3 hours ago. You are no longer just a failed entrepreneur. You are a fugitive, and if you listen closely, I think your ride is here. As if on cue, the wail of sirens cut through the heavy silence of the ballroom. The sound grew louder and closer, piercing the bubble of wealth and privilege. Chad scrambled to his feet, knocking his chair over with a loud clatter. He looked toward the exit, panic wild in his eyes, but the double doors swung open before he could take a single step. The police had arrived and there was nowhere left to run. The sirens sliced through the heavy air of the ballroom, followed by the crash of the double oak doors flying open. Blue and red strobe lights from the squad cars outside washed over the sequins and tuxedos, turning the gala into a chaotic crime scene. A mixed team of uniformed police and FBI agents in dark suits swarmed the room with military precision. Leading them was Special Agent Miller, his face as cold and unyielding as a judge. The elite crowd of Atlanta, who had been toasting Chad just moments ago, parted like the Red Sea. They recoiled in disgust, desperate to distance themselves from the target. Chad stood frozen, the blood draining from his face. His fingers lost their connection to his brain. The crystal champagne flute slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor, the sharp, crisp sound marking the end of his delusions. Chadwick Davis. Agent Miller's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs. You are under arrest for federal bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and felony hit and run. Do not resist. Chad stammered, his eyes darting around wildly for a savior. He looked at Aunt Verna, then at Tanisha, but found only cold stares or terror. This is a mistake, he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. I am a businessman. This is my car. Aunt Verna, tell them. You gave it to me. But no one answered him. Two officers rushed the table, twisting his arms behind his back with practiced efficiency. Chad grunted in pain as he was pressed face down onto the white tablecloth right next to a plate of half-eaten lobster. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the room, sealing his fate. I stood on the stage microphone, still in hand, watching the scene unfold. There was no loud gloating, just a quiet relief spreading through my chest. The man who had mocked me in the hospital, who viewed me as a broken appliance, was now being dragged away in front of hundreds of witnesses. He struggled uselessly, his rented tuxedo bunching up, revealing the pathetic reality beneath the flashy exterior. Agent Miller looked up at me and gave a curt nod, a silent confirmation that justice was served. I set the microphone down, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. The show was over. The great magician Chad Hustles had performed his final trick, transforming himself from a VIP guest into a federal prisoner in the blink of an eye. As the officers hauled Chad toward the exit, his feet dragging against the plush carpet, Tanisha did not rush to comfort him. Instead, she scrambled backward, her gold-sequined dress catching on the chair legs. She looked at the handcuffs on her husband's wrists with a mixture of horror and revulsion, then turned her desperate gaze to the approaching agents. She threw her hands up in a surrender pose, her expensive bracelets jangling loudly. I did not know anything, she shrieked, her voice piercing the room. I am a victim here too. He told me the car was a gift. He told me the money came from his crypto investments. I had nothing to do with the loan. Please, you have to believe me. I am just a beauty influencer. I do not know anything about finance. She looked toward Aunt Verna, pleading with her eyes, but Verna simply took a sip of her champagne and looked away. A female FBI agent stepped forward, blocking Tanisha's path. She held up a tablet displaying the forged document. Mrs. Davis, we have your signature as a witness on the fraudulent loan application, the agent said calmly. We also have records showing that $5,000 of the stolen funds were transferred directly to your personal business account yesterday. You knowingly spent the proceeds of a bank fraud. Tanisha's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. But I just signed what he told me to, she stammered. I did not read it. That is not a crime. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, ma'am, the agent replied, cutting her off. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and receipt of stolen property. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Tanisha let out a wail that was less human and more like a wounded animal. No, you cannot do this. Not do my brand, my followers. This is a mistake. The agent did not hesitate. She spun Tanisha around and clamped the cuffs onto her wrists. The cold steel bit into her skin just inches below the diamond watch she had bought with my stolen credit. As they marched her out of the ballroom behind her weeping husband, the ultimate irony unfolded. The room full of socialites and influencers did not look away in shame. Instead, they pulled out their phones. Dozens of screens lit up, recording the spectacle. Tanisha looked up and saw the wall of cameras. She realized with a sick feeling that she was finally trending. She was finally going viral, just like she always wanted, but not as a star. She was the face of a scandal. I watched from the stage as the flashbulbs popped, immortalizing her humiliation. The livestream comments were already rolling in, and for the first time in her life she could not delete them. The two people who had preyed on my kindness were dragged into the night, leaving me standing alone in the spotlight, unbroken and finally free. The ballroom emptied slowly as the shock of the arrests gave way to the excited chatter of gossip. The air was still thick with the tension of the raid. I stood near the edge of the stage, watching the waiters clear the untouched plates of food. I felt a hand grasp my wrist, not with the gentle touch of a parent, but with the desperate clawing grip of a drowning woman. I turned to see Mama Louise. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The imperious matriarch who had ruled our family with fear and guilt for decades was gone. In her place was a trembling old woman with mascara running down her cheeks and terror in her eyes. She did not scream at me, she did not slap me. Instead, she did something that chilled me to the bone. She sank to her knees right there on the dirty marble floor amidst the discarded napkins and broken glass. She clasped her hands together in a posture of prayer, looking up at me with a pathetic desperation. "Please, Nia," she sobbed, her voice hoarse and broken. "You have to stop this. You have to tell them it was a mistake. They are your flesh and blood. You cannot let them go to prison. You know Chad is not built for jail. And Tanisha, she is too delicate, she will not survive in there. Call that agent back right now. Tell him you gave them permission to sign the papers. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him anything, just get them out." I looked down at her, feeling absolutely nothing. For 30 years, this sight would have broken me. I would have done anything to stop her tears. I would have taken the blame myself just to see her smile. But tonight, I did not see my mother. I saw an accomplice begging for a getaway driver. I pulled my wrist from her grip and took a deliberate step back, creating a physical distance that matched the emotional chasm between us. "Get up, Mother," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You are embarrassing yourself, and you are wasting your breath. I cannot stop this even if I wanted to. This is not a dispute over a borrowed sweater or a missed dinner. It is federal bank fraud. It is felony hit and run. I did not arrest them. The United States government did. I simply provided the evidence that you instructed Tanisha to hide." Her eyes flashed with a sudden spark of her old anger, a defensive flare-up. "I tried to protect this family," she hissed, struggling to get to her feet, her knees cracking. "I tried to keep us together." "You are so selfish, Nia. You always have been. You care more about your precious credit score and your rules than you do about your own sister." "So what if they borrowed the car? So what if they forged a signature? They were going to pay it back. They just needed time. You could have just paid the loan for them and let them pay you back later. You have the money. Why do you have to be so cruel?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that echoed in the empty hall. "They were never going to pay it back, Mother. They were going to drain me dry and then move on to the next victim. They stole my identity. They risked my freedom. And you helped them. But speaking of paying things back, you might want to save some of those tears for yourself. You are going to need them when the mail comes next week." She froze, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "What are you talking about?" she asked suspiciously. I leaned in close, lowering my voice, so only she could hear the final verdict of my audit. "Did you really think I stopped looking after I found the car loan? I am a forensic accountant, Mother. I check everything. I pulled the public property records for the entire family this morning. I saw the second mortgage on your house, the home equity line of credit recorded 3 months ago for $100,000. Mama Louise went pale, her mouth opening in silent horror. She braced herself against a chair. "You signed as a guarantor for a business loan for Chad Hustles LLC, didn't you?" I continued relentlessly. "You put your paid-off house, the house I worked 2 jobs to help you buy up, as collateral so he could play day trader. You signed those papers willingly because he promised you he would double the money. Well, I saw the transaction history. That account is empty, Mother. He spent it all on lifestyle and bad crypto bets." I watched the realization crush her. She had not just enabled them, she had bet her own survival on them. Now that Chad is in federal custody and his assets are frozen, the bank is going to call that loan immediately. It is a standard clause in high-risk lending. And since Chad has zero liquidity, they are going to come for the collateral. You are going to lose the house, Mother. The bank will foreclose on it before the end of the year. And no, I will not pay for it. I will not bail you out. I will not let you move in with me. I suggest you find a good bankruptcy attorney instead of kneeling here begging me to save criminals." I turned my back on her for the last time, leaving her standing alone in the empty ballroom, facing the financial ruin she had brought upon herself. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. While Chad and Tanisha were being processed at the county detention center, the financial machinery that had supported their charade began to dismantle the rest of the family. 2 days after the arrest, Aunt Verna summoned Mama Louise to her office. I was there sitting quietly in the corner, not as a participant, but as a witness to the final severance of ties. Mama Louise looked aged and frail, her eyes swollen from 48 hours of crying. She started to launch into her usual plea for money, begging Verna for bail funds and legal retainers, but Verna raised a hand and silenced her. Verna placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. It was a termination letter for the monthly stipend she had provided to Mama Louise for the past decade. "I am cutting you off," Louise Verna said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "I gave you that money to maintain the family home and live comfortably in your retirement. Instead, you used it to fund Chad's delusions and Tanisha's vanity. You enabled them to steal from Nia. You chose a thief over your own daughter because he flattered your ego. That ends today. There will be no bail money. There will be no lawyers paid for by my estate. You are on your own." Mama Louise gasped, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. "But Verna," she stammered, "they will lose everything. Tanisha cannot stay in jail. She is your niece." Verna leaned forward, her eyes hard. "She is a criminal, Louise. And so are you morally, if not legally. You have a second mortgage on your house that is about to default. I suggest you liquidate your assets immediately before the bank takes them. Do not call me again unless it is a medical emergency, and even then think twice." The prediction I made in the ballroom came true faster than even I expected. The bank called the loan on Chad's shell company immediately upon his arrest. Since Mama Louise had signed as the guarantor, the debt fell squarely on her shoulders. She did not have the $100,000. She did not even have $5,000. Desperate to hire a high-powered defense attorney for Tanisha, believing she could still save her golden child, Mama Louise made the only choice she had left. She put the house on the market. It was a fire sale. The house I had worked 2 jobs to help her buy, the house that was supposed to be her sanctuary, was sold for a fraction of its value to a cash buyer. I watched from across the street as the movers hauled out the furniture. The antique dining table where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinners, the piano Tanisha never learned to play, and the velvet armchairs were all loaded into a truck. Most of the proceeds went immediately to the bank to satisfy the lien. The remainder, which should have been her retirement nest egg, was handed over to a sleazy defense lawyer who promised he could get Tanisha a plea deal. A week later, I drove to the address Mama Louise had texted me. It was not a gated community. It was not even a suburb. It was a bleak, gray complex of subsidized housing on the south side of the city, known as the Gardens, though there was not a single flower in sight. The parking lot was full of potholes and rusted sedans. I watched as my mother struggled up the concrete stairs to Unit 4B, carrying 2 plastic grocery bags which contained the last of her clothes. She looked out of place in her designer coat, a relic of a life she could no longer afford. She fumbled with the key, the door sticking in the humidity, before finally pushing her way into the cramped, dimly lit apartment. I did not get out of the car. I did not offer to help carry her bags. I sat there with the engine running, feeling a profound sense of tragedy mixed with inevitability. She had sacrificed her home, her security, and her relationship with her only responsible child, all to protect the daughter who had helped rob her. I shifted the car into drive and pulled away from the curb. The rain began to fall again, blurring the image of the rundown apartment complex in my rearview mirror. It was a harsh punishment, but it was one she had designed for herself. She was now living in the reality she had created, stripped of the illusions that had cost us all so much. I turned onto the main road and headed toward my own apartment, a place that was small, quiet, and most importantly, entirely mine. The audit was truly complete. The accounts were balanced, and for the first time in years, I was not in the red. 6 months passed before the final gavel fell, sealing the fate of the House of Hustle. I sat in the back row of the federal courtroom, my hands folded calmly in my lap, watching the conclusion of the audit I had started in a hospital bed. The wheels of justice had ground slowly, but they had ground exceedingly fine. Chad stood before the bench, no longer wearing the rental tuxedo or the arrogant smirk of a visionary entrepreneur. He was dressed in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame, his hair shorn close to his skull, stripped of the expensive grooming products he used to cherish. He had taken a plea deal. Faced with the overwhelming mountain of evidence I had compiled, the forged documents, the blockchain analysis of the stolen funds, and the undeniable security footage of the hit and run his public defender had advised him to beg for mercy. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for financial predators, adjusted her glasses and looked down at him with undisguised disdain. She sentenced Chadwick Davis to 60 months in a federal correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay full restitution, a sum he would likely never earn in his lifetime. As the marshals led him away, he did not look back at the gallery. He kept his head down, finally understanding that in the real world, you cannot fake it until you make it. You simply pay for what you broke. Tanisha fared better legally, but her ego suffered a sentence worse than death. By turning state's evidence and testifying against her husband, she managed to avoid prison time. The judge sentenced her to 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. The terms were specific and humiliating. She was restricted from leaving the state, her social media accounts were monitored for compliance with advertising laws, and she was assigned to a roadside cleanup crew. The girl who refused to work a 9-to-5 because she was destined for stardom was now destined to wear a neon safety vest and pick up litter on the side of the interstate. I watched her weep as the sentence was read, not tears of remorse but tears of self-pity. She was no longer an influencer. She was a cautionary tale. I left the courthouse before they could see me and took a cab straight to my office. The firm had been buzzing all week with rumors of a restructuring, but I had kept my head down, focusing on my casework. I walked past the cubicles where I had spent years quietly fixing other people's mistakes and headed toward the corner office where the managing partner, Mr. Sterling, was waiting for me. I knocked on the heavy glass door and entered. Mr. Sterling was standing by the window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. He turned and smiled, a rare expression for a man known for his icy demeanor. He gestured for me to sit not in the guest chair, but on the plush sofa usually reserved for high-profile clients. Nia, he began, sitting opposite me. I have been reviewing your performance over the last 2 quarters. Specifically, I took a very close look at the dossier you prepared for the Davis investigation. He tapped a thick leather binder on the coffee table. It was my audit file, the one I had handed to the FBI. I stiffened slightly, worried that I had violated company policy by using office resources for a personal matter. But Mr. Sterling raised a hand to stop me before I could speak. "Do not apologize," he said. "It is a masterpiece. I have seen forensic accountants with 30 years of experience who could not have unraveled a crypto laundering scheme and a structured bank fraud that quickly. You didn't just find the numbers, Nia. You built a narrative. You anticipated their moves. You trapped them with their own greed. That is not just accounting. That is strategic warfare." He stood up and walked to his desk, picking up a sleek black box. "We need that kind of predatory instinct at the top of the food chain. The board and I have decided to create a new division focused on high net worth asset recovery and fraud prevention. We want you to run it." I stared at him, stunned. "You want me to be the director?" I asked. Effective immediately, he nodded, handing me the box. It contained a set of heavy brass keys and a new security badge. "Your salary doubles. You get the corner office on the 35th floor, and you have full autonomy to build your own team. We are tired of losing clients to fraudsters. We want you to hunt them down before the money vanishes." I took the keys, the cool metal pressing into my palm. It was the weight of validation. For years, my family had told me I was boring, that I was a worker drone, that I lacked vision. But it was that very attention to detail, that relentless pursuit of the truth, that had just elevated me to a level they could only dream of. I walked out of Mr. Sterling's office and headed toward the elevator to see my new domain. Tanisha had wanted to be a boss babe. Chad had wanted to be a mogul. They played dress up and ended up in ruins. I had done the work quietly and consistently, and now I was the one running the show. The audit was over, but my career was just beginning. The rain in Atlanta was relentless that evening. It hammered against the asphalt, turning the streets into slick black rivers reflecting the city lights. But this time, I was not pedaling a rusted bicycle through the downpour with no protection. I was cocooned inside the cabin of a slate gray Porsche 911 Turbo S. The leather seats were warm against my back, and the climate control kept the air crisp and dry. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the hum of 600 horsepower waiting for my command. This machine was not a gift. It was not a lease. It was not obtained through fraud or leverage. I had bought it with the signing bonus from my promotion paid for with a single cashier's check. I navigated the car down Piedmont Avenue, the wipers rhythmic and silent. I was heading home to my new condo in Buckhead, but I decided to take the long way past the municipal bus depot. I told myself it was to check the traffic, but deep down, I knew I was looking for closure. And then, I saw her. Standing under the flickering halogen light of the bus shelter was a figure in a neon orange safety vest that was 2 sizes too big. It was Tanisha. She was holding a plastic trash bag in one hand and a gripping tool in the other, the standard uniform for court-ordered community service. Her hair, usually styled to perfection, was frizzy and plastered to her forehead by the humidity. The designer sneakers she used to cherish were caked in mud and grime. She looked exhausted, defeated, and entirely ordinary. She was staring down the street looking for the number 12 bus, the same bus she used to mock people for taking. She looked cold. For a fleeting second, I felt the old instinct rise up in my chest. The instinct to pull over, the instinct to save her, the instinct to be the big sister who fixes the mess. But then I looked at my arm. The cast was gone, but the silver scar from the surgery was still there, a permanent reminder of what happens when you let parasites feed on you for too long. I did not touch the brake. Instead, I downshifted. The engine let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the chassis. Tanisha looked up at the sound. Her eyes locked onto the sleek silhouette of the Porsche. She did not see me behind the tinted glass, but she saw the car. She saw the emblem of success that she had tried so hard to fake. I saw her jaw drop slightly, a look of pure envy and confusion washing over her face. I allowed a small, genuine smile to touch my lips. I did not honk. I did not roll down the window to wave. I simply pressed my foot firmly against the accelerator. The car surged forward, launching me past the bus stop with effortless power, leaving Tanisha and the misery she created shrinking in my rearview mirror. As the city lights blurred into streaks of gold behind me, I thought about that rusty mountain bike from the garage. I used to hate that bicycle. I used to curse the moment I fell onto the wet pavement. But as I merged onto the highway, reaching speeds that Chad could only dream of, I realized the truth. That broken bike was not a tragedy. It was a vehicle of liberation. It broke my bone so I could finally break the cycle. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of new leather and freedom. Thank you for the ride, Chad. You took my Mercedes, but you gave me back my life. And this time, I am never looking back. This story serves as a brutal reminder that sharing DNA does not guarantee loyalty. For years, Nia confused exploitation with love, allowing her family to view her kindness as a weakness to be harvested. The ultimate lesson here is that keeping the peace often costs us our self-respect. You cannot save people who are determined to destroy themselves, nor can you buy the affection of those who only value you as a resource. Nia's victory proves that true success is built on integrity and hard work, not shortcuts, and sometimes the only way to heal is to burn the bridge. If you were driving that Porsche, would you have stopped to help your sister, or did she deserve to be left in the rain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.